Russian President Vladimir Putin has emphasized that Russia will not rule out using its new hypersonic Oreshnik missile in a strike on Ukraine.
Now, during a press conference at the end of his two-day visit to Kazakhstan, Putin also reiterated that Moscow will always respond to Western weapons strikes on its territory. Putin said that the use of the Oreshnik against the military-industrial facilities, and even decision-making centers, quote-unquote, in Kyiv is not ruled out. Now, this threat comes after Russia used the experimental weapons for the first time against the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The missile has 6 warheads and flies at 10 times the speed of sound. The Russian leader also asserted that the weapon has the destructive power of a meteorite and is comparable in strength to a nuclear strike when used several times at once.
I
said that if applied in a single strike using multiple systems at once, using 2, 3, 4 complexes, it would be comparable in force to the use of nuclear weapons. But it is not nuclear because it is A, highly accurate, and B, not equipped with a nuclear explosive device.
И Б, не оснащено ядерным взрывным устройством.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has described Putin's comments as saber-rattling aimed at disrupting efforts to bring the war to an end.
At the summit in Astana, Putin further recalled U.S. decision to allow long-range strikes in Russia. He said that this decision by the Biden administration could be aimed at creating obstacles for President-elect Donald Trump to negotiate a peace deal. Putin hailed Trump as a clever and experienced leader, voicing confidence that he would be able to find a solution. Biden, meanwhile, put out a reminder of the urgency and importance of supporting Ukraine. A statement released by the White House says the United States stands with more than 50 countries in support of Ukraine and its fight for freedom.
Biden referred to Russia's overnight aerial attack in particular, describing it as outrageous. This was Russia's second big attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure this month, triggering deep power cuts across the country. Putin says this was in response to Ukraine's strikes on Russian territory with US ATACMS missiles.
Beset by the continual Russian assault, Ukraine has signed off on massive military spending plans for next year. Kyiv's 2025 budget plans will see more than $50 billion or 60% of all expenditure go towards defense and security. It's outgunned and Kyiv is outmanned and outspent by Moscow. But Kyiv has been forced to ramp up defense spending to support the war effort as the conflict nears the 3-year mark.
We're now being joined by Dr. Charles Kupchan from Washington, D.C. He's a senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA, sir. Always a pleasure to have you.
Good to be with you.
Now, Dr. Kupchan, your assessment of Putin's statements, of course, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has called it saber-rattling. Do you feel that at this point this can no longer just be considered rhetoric, considering Russia did use the Oreshnik missiles recently?
Well, it's more than saber-rattling, because what we're looking at here is an escalatory spiral in which the United States has gradually increased the power, the range of the weapons that it's providing to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians, each time the U.S. moves forward, retaliate. And I do think the United States is in a difficult position here for a simple reason. And that is that Russia cares more about Ukraine than the United States does. How do we know that? Well, the Russians have lost 700,000, perhaps, soldiers. The United States hasn't put a single boot on the ground. And so really what's happening here is that each time the United States and its allies put more skin in the game, the Russians raise the ante by 1. So here it is, I think, saber-rattling when it comes to the use of nuclear weapons, but not saber-rattling when it comes to new range, new scope of Russian attacks, because we know that Russia has already used this more sophisticated, faster hypersonic weapon to hit targets inside Ukraine.
Dr. Kupchan, Do you feel there is going to be a continuous escalation till the 20th of January? Because there was a sudden, I would say, the pace at which matters are being escalated suddenly increased post 6th of November, when the permission was given to Ukraine, and after which the Oreshnik missiles were fired in return by Russia. And as of now, these kind of statements, certain figures are even mentioning it as World War III. These terms, this kind of language was never used before 6th of November. Ever since then, till 20th of January, do you feel we'll continuously seeing more escalation at this pace?
Yes, I mean, I do think that part of what's going on here is that both sides, the Ukrainians and the Russians, are trying to get in as good a position as possible, looking at what Trump might do when he takes office, and that is attempt to negotiate a ceasefire. The Biden administration, because it doesn't know whether Trump will continue aid to Ukraine, has been getting as much weaponry to Ukraine as possible between the election and the inauguration. It's also approved these deep strikes using ATACMS weapons, and it's also approved the use of cluster landmines. The Russians, in response, have increased the scope of air attacks against Ukraine, energy infrastructure in particular. The last few nights, some of the most significant and broad attacks against Ukraine that we've seen. So yes, I do think both sides are turning up the heat right now, because they know that it may be come January 20 that the United States inserts itself to try to broker a ceasefire. Will it work? Nobody knows, but I think it's safe to say that Trump is going to try.
Absolutely, Doctor. In fact, I just wanted to expand on that and what Shivan said as well. From what we've heard from Vladimir Putin, he appears to be keen for a Trump administration. That being said, everyone, of course, has been speculating on how a Trump administration would somehow try and broker a deal between Russia and Ukraine. So what's your assessment on that? What do you think will be Trump's first steps with regards to this?
Well, I think his first step will be to reach out to both Putin and Zelensky and try to begin a three-way conversation. And probably he'll bring in some NATO allies here, because they're an important part of the picture, to try to see whether there isn't common ground. And I think at the outset, Trump may make some progress. The easy part is the territory, and that's because a line of sorts will exist where the two forces meet. The front line becomes the line of contact. I think Trump is underestimating how difficult it will be to reach agreement with Russia on a host of other issues, including the geopolitical status of Ukraine. I think Russia may ask for neutrality. Ukrainians are not going to accept that. Russia may ask for caps on Ukrainian forces. Ukraine is going to say no. Russia may want NATO to pull back from its eastern frontier. I think NATO is going to say, no, we are not going to do that, because we need these forces to deter you from making other incursions, other attacks against possible NATO members. So this is going to be a tough negotiation. It's going to last a long time. I don't think that Trump is going to get what he said he's going to get, a deal within 24 hours.
But there's going to be a lot of weight on Keith Kellogg's shoulders. He's been appointed as the special envoy for Ukraine and Russia. Of course, that job is going to start the moment he comes into office. We will need to wait and watch what happens. But as of now, I think it's safe to say that we are going to be seeing more escalations in the lead up to the 20th of January. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Dr. Charles Kopchin joining us from Washington, D.C.